reason, challenges and opportunities, and I'm going to focus on the opportunities of Key Stage 5 Core RE. And we're from, at the moment, in the sixth form sector, and Core RE is something that we are really experienced with. My name is Catherine Herring, I'm Director of Catholic Life, and this is my colleague Maria Coyle, who is in my department, the focus and the person who is taking this forward to help us develop Core RE in Notre Dame. So why is it important? This is why. Pope Francis' recent document that was published last year mentioned this, that faith and reason is the distinctive mark of a Catholic school. And that's why I called it Faith and Reason. Because we have to dialogue to search for the truth. And when we're talking about 16 to 19-year-olds, that dialogue is crucial. In fact, I would say that dialogue is crucial for all our age groups, but especially when they reach that autonomous age of 16 to 19. But we want to basically help them grow in their humanity. And Core RE is at the focus of that. So what are the challenges? Well, how do we meet the demands of our students, as well as the inspection framework, and I am a trained inspector, but also develop a curriculum that is authentic and inclusive with a clear assessment attempt for Key Stage 5 RE. So what we did was, Maria came to me, said, I've got to come up with this because I've seen this thing called thinking loops, I'd like to go forward with it. I said, what's it about? She explained it. And I said, let's go forward with it. And when Maria gives her bit of the delivery, she'll explain how we use it at Notre Dame.
Sorry, can I just ask, will we get a copy?
Yes. So let's have a look, because you can't understand where we're going unless we understand where we've been and where we are now. So this is the past. That's what Catholic schools were for. The congregation. Build a school first, they said, because the congregation were there. Well, now we're not in that situation anymore. And most of the young people who come to us are not churched. So when we look at the past, what RE was in the past is now not what it is in the present, and I doubt what it's going to be in the future. So, what are the present challenges? Well, let's have a look at the makeup of the students. First of all, as you can see, there are 207 schools with sixth forms, with over 45,000 students in them, 65% of the total. Majority, though, when you look at where the bubble is, where the bulge is, are in sixth forms with 100 to 300 students. That could be some of you. We're in the sixth form. We're one of the 14 in England and Wales. There are 13 in England and 1 in Wales. We have 28,000 students, more like 30 when you take Wales into account, with 35% of the total, and all but one have over 1,000 students. In fact, Notre Dame has 2,400 students. State-funded secondaries, 59.6 have Catholic population, those who stated baptised Roman Catholic. Sixth form colleges much lower. Now, so who's in our colleges, who are in our schools? Who's sitting in front of us? The pattern of belief, according to the Catholic Education Service, is Catholic, other Christian, no religion, or other religion. But this really does vary. So, what are the present challenges? Well, I put this I don't care, because that's essentially what you're getting from the students. No, I don't care. Right, I don't care. Face, full. So we're going here to, well, this is the problem. The RE, the new Religious Education Directorate, is trying to address this poverty of income, comprehension and mistrust. What is it about, and why do I have to learn it? I like to say this, I like to get to heaven, but I don't want to get dead. So I say that because the students want to get the A-level, or they want to get their qualifications, but they don't do the work. That's not entirely true, but you know what I mean. They want to come to Catholic institutions, but they want to cherry pick. They want what they want out of it, but they don't want the whole picture sometimes. In our sixth forms, we are really diverse. Notre Dame is a wonderfully diverse place. That's why I love actually teaching there. It is a wonderfully diverse place in every single way you can look at diverse. It's diverse. So if you've got people who are sitting in front of you who are extremely diverse from their backgrounds, from the schools they've come from, their academic ability, their cultures, their worldviews, how do you address teaching them Core RE from a Catholic perspective? Many of our students haven't been to Catholic schools. They have not done the GCSE. Some of them haven't done RE since probably year 7 or 8, or if they've done it, it's been under some sort of RSHE type thing. They've not actually addressed it. So how do we have people in our rooms who've done GCSE RE in a Catholic school with those who don't? How do we deal with those who are Catholics but haven't been near a church since they took their first communion? And many of whom never taken their first communion were baptised, but never actually set a foot in the church since. So, why am I saying come from our feeder schools, but from over 100 different schools? And they've chosen themselves often to come to us. It's not been chosen for them by their parents. So they're much more autonomous. And that means that they're much more aware of what they want. They've chosen their A levels. They've chosen their level 3 qualifications or T levels or applied vocational subjects. So when we ask them the question in interview, do you really happy to do core RE? Well, they see Notre Dame Sixth Form College outstanding. Yes, we will. But they're not sure what that means. So, what are the challenges that we're facing? Well, obviously, the new red goes up to Key Stage 3. Key Stage 4 has GCSE. Key Stage 5 at A level has these specifications. But what do we do at core RE? Well, this is the diversity that we face. Not only in their starting points. So we have everybody from every academic ability in our colleges, but also the experience and the worldviews of our students, which are massively different. Even within particular groups, their worldviews will be very different. So what do we do and how can we address it? But if you're in a different setting, and we were talking about this last night, if you're in a different setting, you can do it different ways. Because especially if the vast majority of your young people have come up through the school, you know what they've learned before. Or we come to them, I could have students from 100 different feeders or different schools, some are feeders and some are not, and I have no clue what they've done. It's very difficult to baseline them. So these are the opportunities, and I think the biggest opportunity, I was talking to Paul, who was our keynote speaker at the end last night, and I think the key word is subsidiarity. It has to be devolved down to us, what we teach our students. Why? Because ultimately we're the ones who know them. So I looked through the Religious Education Directory very carefully, and I think how we teach in Key Stage 5 is really appropriate. We engage in respectful and fruitful dialogue to develop their critical faculties. And they need those critical faculties developing, because strangely enough, they accept quite a lot of things that they need to actually critically evaluate. They will reject religion, saying we've evaluated it, God does not exist, fair enough. But they accept other things where they've not critically evaluated at all. But also, we want them to do this is relate their knowledge to other subjects within the curriculum, things that are relevant to them, but also to their lives. So, what are the challenges engaging with core RE? Well, we all know there's a growth in secularism and utilitarianism. What use is it? What's the point? Am I going to get a qualification? Why should I bother? I could spend the time doing my revision. I could spend the time doing something else. Apathy, I don't care. I'm not interested. I've got good ethics. Reluctance. Now, some of this has come from my colleagues in the sixth form sector who I asked some questions, and they gave me some of this information. So this is common among us in the sixth form college sector, with reluctance and reticence from the students. They're reluctant to talk, they don't want to talk. Attendance, that's a big issue, getting them to attend. Now, we have quite good attendance, but we have to be on it all the time, because attendance, well, why do I have to come? If I don't turn up to my A-level subjects, I won't pass. If I don't turn up to you, what's going to happen to me? Also, this is really important. They don't like studying anything that they don't see as directly relevant to their lives. And especially it's theology or spirituality. It's not relevant to me, why do I need to do it? So, this is our opportunities, engagement. Dialogue. First of all, we have to ask them and get them to listen to people who have diametrically different views to their own. And they don't like doing it. So that's the first thing. Listen and look and engage with views that are different to theirs. To develop critical faculties about the relationship with faith and culture. To actually examine things that they accept, perhaps they need to critically evaluate, but also look at how is faith important? How is it to other people? How does it fit in my worldview? And relevance. How actually is really relevant to what they do in their other subjects and to their lives? Because if we make it relevant to them, they're going to be engaged with it. Reason enters into dialogue with faith. The two wings on which the church flies, John Paul II says, was faith and reason. How do we open their eyes to the stories? I was listening to that story about the prodigal son, and the two words that resonated with me was lost and found. A lot of our students are lost. They're lost in themselves, they're lost in culture, they're looking for something. Sometimes they think they found it, and they reject anything that doesn't fit in with their worldview. But essentially, we need to open their eyes to the transcendent. And this is what we're trying to do. So, assessment in Core RE, how do we do it? We have one lesson a week, assess what and how. So what we're going to assess. What's its purpose? If we don't assess, well, they don't take it seriously. We haven't got an assessment, so why are we taking it seriously? So, this is the inspection framework clearly says there is no need for a summative assessment at Key Stage 5. We do not need to do a summative assessment. But it references creative ways of knowing what the students are learning. How do we know what they're learning? What do we want them to learn? And as long as we can justify it and monitor it, then that will be accepted. And there are lots of different ways of doing it, and I'm sure many of you do these ways, whether it's a learning journal, or you do EPQ, or you do NOCN, or maybe some internal assessment. But it does basically needs to be justified and monitored essentially by the governors. So they have to see some way of seeing what you're doing and why you're doing it. So this is our curriculum intent. We call it Credo, which is I believe. Basically, students explore, evaluate and understand and reflect on their own and other worldviews. Because we want them to think, well, what do I believe? And what does someone else believe? We've used the knowledge lenses to understand, discern and respond from the RED. Because we think that that really fits nicely into getting them to understand what we're trying to do with them. And that's how we're going to assess them. What they know. Can they analyse, evaluate, compare? But this is the important bit, and this is what we're really going to be looking at in a minute with Marie. Respond with integrity. How do they respond? How do we make it relevant to them? Because ultimately, we want them to be self-aware, and we want to open their eyes. We want to open their eyes to something more than some worldview that they have. Otherwise, they're going to be in a silo, and that silo will close them off. To help them grow as a person, and hopefully as a person in faith, we need to help them respond. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass on to Marie, who's actually going to show how we do it.
So I'd like to introduce you to something called Thinking Moves Framework, an A to Z framework for metacognition. So metacognition is having a bit of a moment. There's a lot of research. The Education Endowment Foundation said that if it's done well, it can add 7 months learning in any given 12-month period. So it's something that we do need to take seriously. But they've also acknowledged that it's a bit of a woolly topic. Teachers struggle to really nail it. And in my experience, this framework nails it. It covers in 26 moves every different type of thinking that you can do. So if you've got some information, this framework covers any way of interacting with it. That's the claim. And I'm just really passionate about this. I think it's the best tool that I've come across in 23 years of teaching. It's not RE specific, but what we've done at Notre Dame is introduce it via the general RE programme, and it's given the core RE that little bit more kudos in terms of teaching and learning, because they can see that it's got this academic rigour to it, and they can also apply it in other subjects. And we are at the stage where we're kind of encouraging other departments to use the same vocabulary. So it was written by a guy called Roger Sutcliffe. It was 10 years in the making, published 2020. And he says it's simple, it's memorable, and it's complete. So yeah, these are the 26 moves. I'm not going to labour all 26 of them today, but you can see it's arranged in an A to Z, and some of them are kind of pairs, so thinking ahead, back, connect, divide. It's very, very memorable. Our students learn it in a lesson. It's actually triple coded as well, because you've got the words themselves, you've got the icons, and there's also BSL sign language to go with it as well, to triple code it. So they can recall that quite easily. One that sometimes needs a bit unpacking is yield. The icon is a tree bending, and that's just any occasion where a student acts, kind of modifies their view in some way, or just gives way in an argument. So rather than just shouting at each other and maintaining their position, they can compromise in some way. But that's all 26. I'm going to just look at these 6 because I think these are really kind of key moves. Thinking ahead, thinking back, connecting, dividing, listening, looking, and weighing up. They all come with loads of synonyms, so you don't need to stick to the 26 words that are in the framework. The framework is just a mechanism for memorising the moves. So, thinking ahead, that's any time that you are looking at a goal, making a prediction, thinking about consequences, anything that's kind of future oriented. Setting yourself aims as well, targets, that kind of thing. Thinking back, anytime you're recalling information, so it's all about recall, but also using historical case studies, relating something to empirical evidence that's been gathered, anything like that. If I just jump down here, look, listen, covers the 3rd time frame. So we've got in the future, in the past. Look, listen is very rooted in the present. So what are we actually doing now? Have you read the question properly? What is the data that's in front of us? But even that internal proprioception of what's going on in my interior life. So this really supports that respond part of the IUD as well. So what's going on inside me when I think about this story, for example. But it's also just the skill of have you looked properly? What can you observe in this story, in this picture, etc. These two, connect and divide, obviously kind of go together. We can use the words compare, link, separate, and opposite. In some ways, divide is more fundamental than connect, because you need to have distinguished between two things, that they're in a separate category, before you then spot ways in which they might overlap or connect. And then this last one here, weigh up, that's the term used for any value judgment or conclusion that someone might come to, a decision at the end. Okay. You also have coaching questions for each of the moves, and Dialogue Works, who've published this, are really focused on the kind of primary application of the framework. But I think it's really powerful for our secondary and our 6th form students, because it empowers them to move towards being a self-regulated learner. If they know these coaching questions, they can internalise them and start asking them themselves in the process of producing their work. So, for example, they might ask themselves, what are the consequences of this? Have I predicted what might happen? If we're going to agree this rule, how might that play out in real life, kind of thing? What caused this? Have I kind of thought back? What happened? What happened just before this? What came first? That kind of thing. What's the same? What's different? Let's just say, what do we have here? what have we got in front of us? And the weighing up. What's important? So coming to that judgment at the end. I've included this just to underline that the A to Z sequence is not the important thing. So this is on my wall in my room, and I've grouped them around different activities. So I've got gathering information, the moves that are important when we're gathering information, checking progress, coming to a conclusion. So there I've got weigh up, infer, justify, yield. This is the corner that I'm in the most, probably building concepts. So what is a religion? How is this the same? How is this different? How would we group that? Can we zoom in on this particular case? Can we zoom out and think of context? Zoom out is amazing. The A-level students have suddenly clicked what a conclusion is, because they're saying, I don't know how to just like not repeat myself all the time. And I've said to them, well, what if you zoom out? What's the big picture here? Can you then reframe what you've already said, but in a kind of different framework, different kind of frame. So thinking back to what Catherine said about what does this have to do with me, I don't care, the kind of challenges of teaching core RE. My claim is that you can use thinking moves to kind of put the ball back in their court. What's this got to do with me? Well, that's exactly what we're trying to find out. What has this got to do with you? How is this the same as how you see the world? And how is this different from how you see the world? So these very simple moves can be used to help them understand how to get through the door, how to make a connection between what they're thinking and their previous experiences and what we're presenting to them. So take notice. What is the worldview that's being presented here? Do you actually know what the Catholic Church teaches about this, or have you just assumed something? So let's be careful. Can we unpick exactly what is being said? And then what does connect? Are there any ways in which this Christian practice or this bit of scripture has any connection with my worldview? And then the divide move, like what's different? What is distinctive about how you see the world that doesn't connect with the Christian worldview that we're telling you about? This is from a lesson on Lent that we've done recently. So remember, this is to an incredibly diverse group of year 12s, some of whom, they've heard this every year since primary school, some of whom it is completely new. So we did pray, fast, give. We went through the basic story of Jesus in the wilderness and then connected it to the Christian practice of Lent. And then I asked them to zoom out and connect. Can you make any connections with other religions? Inevitably, we usually have some Muslims in the classes who are very keen to draw parallels with Ramadan, Jewish students as well and their experiences of fasting, but then also connected it with secular ideas. In what way, if you don't practice a faith, is there any way that you try to detach yourself from habits? Have you ever done a detox, that kind of thing? So making sure that there's opportunities taken for them to do the work of doing the connection. So we're not just spoon feeding them what the connection is. How can you connect it to your life personally? This is how we just check their understanding of the content that we've delivered. So which of these fits with a Christian view of Lent? They just had to select the ones that they thought did fit, and that generated quite a good discussion. But now we're going to think about how do we actually assess whether or not they're making progress in these three different ways of understanding. Understanding and discern, it's fairly self-explanatory how the thinking moves vocabulary maps onto that kind of assessment, because it's the vocabulary of critical thinking. So that's fairly straightforward. So I want to zoom in on this, because I think this is the biggest challenge. How can we get them to respond personally, explain these differences in way of life, critically reflect and respond in dialogue? And how do we get them to respond with integrity? My argument is that the thinking moves provide both a way of opening the door in the first place, in quite an easy way, that, look, look, listen, connect, divide. And it's also a bit of a safety net because we've got wildly different worldviews, very passionate 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are more and more reactive and triggered by the content that we're delivering. And the thinking moves provide a way of just taking the jeopardy out of it a little bit, because we can refocus them on what kind of thinking are you doing there. One example that springs to mind is a lesson that we did on just war theory, and I had a student from the Middle East who took issue with the way that the case study had been presented of the First Gulf War. She said, well, actually, I think you'll find that before this, then this and this and this happened. And, you know, I don't think it's right to imply that whatever. And she was ready to pop. And I said, well done. What kind of thinking have you done there? What move have you just made that shows really good critical thinking? And that wrong-footed her. She's like, I'm not sure. I think you've zoomed out, haven't you? You've zoomed out and you've said we need to look at this in a bigger context. And that developed then into an academic discussion of, you know, what is the value of a historical case? And, you know, we can always zoom out further. What else do we need to take into account when we're putting forward an example, for instance? And that can really help them as well when they're doing small discussion work. If you give them specific moves to make, they can take on the role of trying to find the difference or trying to find the connection. It can make it less personal, and particularly the more reticent ones can be given, you know, a bit more of a step-by-step way into the discussion. Yes. So, how can we help students do this, and how can we capture them doing it? That's my aim with this. This is, again, going back to the Lenten lesson. After checking that they've understood the content of what a Christian might actually do in Lent and why, they then are challenged to reformulate it for themselves. So this is their authentic response, my response with integrity. So we've said, honouring your own worldview, can you reformulate any of these to fit with how you see the world? And some of them say, well, actually, I'm a practicing Christian. I don't need to reformulate it. I'm going to take that formulation. Some of them focus in on like reconnecting. Quite a few of them use the idea of looking after their relationships. So some of them talked about wanting to reconnect with friends and look after their relationship with friends and family. So they don't believe in God, but they could see the value of looking after valuable relationships. So yeah, this is a work in progress, but we're imagining formalising that in some way and having at the end of a sequence of lessons a piece of more extended written work, and using the coaching questions to help them develop their writing a little bit. So if we ask them, what aspects of the Christian view of Lent fit with your worldview? So that's firmly in the respond section because it's about them. And these coaching questions hopefully will help them develop that as an answer. So are there any similarities with how you see the world or any practices you keep? Can you tell me more? That's a very basic coaching question. Just make sure you expand your answer a little bit. Can you give me an example of that, a specific example? And then, how is this different from how you see the world and what's important here? So, if our aim is to help a very diverse student body engage with something that they are likely to either have encountered and rejected or never encountered, and then some of them are growing in that understanding, how do we make it relevant to all of them? And I think keeping it simple and using these thinking moves is one option. So have we really understood what is being presented? Double check, do we really understand what is being said here? Is there anything that connects with me? And what doesn't fit with my worldview? Which takes us back to,
Why is it important?
yes,
Which in the end, we want to open, to dialogue with them, to open their hearts and minds to see more clearly, to reconnect with that great story. A story that most of them have never come across or have thought they have rejected. So that's what we're trying to do. And it is a working process, and yes, we're still on a journey. And when we go back to these, how are we going to assess it? We're going to get them to do it, rather than, because we can't mark 2,400. One of my full-time members of staff will have 500 students. And if they do an assessment all at the same time, it's almost impossible. So how are we going to get them to do it? By using, as Maria says, the metacognitive processes of thinking loops, so that they can understand themselves and therefore become empowered and more autonomous, and less feeling that they're being told what to think and how to think, because that's what puts their backs up. If you say, this is what you must think, this is how you must think, well, no. But give them a way where they can start thinking for themselves and reflecting, they open up. And therefore, maybe, just maybe, we've opened up their minds and hearts to the great story. I think as C.S. Lewis mentioned it. Any questions? Yes, sorry, can you tell me your name?
I'm Nitsa.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Catherine.
With Coyle, do you get the topics for the lessons that you're doing from the diocese, or do you come up together as a department to say, okay, we're going to look at these topics and use the thinking loops?
No, our diocese doesn't give us any topics. So what we do is, as a team, we've been looking at what are the key questions. So we've been looking at what key questions. So at the moment we're using what is a human, what is ultimate reality. Looking at the RED, I think I'm going to move and reframe those into communication, revelation, vocation, to make it in line with more with the RED. But no, we think up the topics, but we try and justify, and the same with all the sixth form colleges, but we don't have a core RE curriculum. And I think the danger of that, as I said at the beginning, is that it's very different in certain schools and certain dioceses than it would be. Look at Westminster, it's virtually vast majority of Catholics in their schools. But you look at us, fewer. And therefore the people in our sixth forms will have less experience. So if you go in a certain way, they just won't get it. They won't be able to access it. And we've only got one lesson a week to try and get them to engage in it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sure.
Any others? Yes.
Do you do any work at the start to teach them about worldviews? What is a worldview? What does it mean to have one before you start discussing that in terms of your vocabulary in the lesson?
Well, it's a really interesting thing we do, but we do this lesson, which we do at the end of the upper sixth, which we're actually going to move. But the problem is it deals with Matthew Syed's work, Rebel Ideas. If you ever read his book, I recommend it. When essentially we try and get them to how he argued the difference between silos and echo chambers, and how a lot of us, and especially social media, encourages silos and echo chambers. That you stick with groups and what you know and who they know. And we use a case study that he used to try and get them to see that somebody who had a very distinct worldview that most of us in this room would disagree with, but how he changed his view because he was exposed to other worldviews and made him critically reflect on his own worldview.
It's currently quite implicit at the start and becomes more explicit, but we're reviewing that and probably going to make it more explicit at the start.
The difficulty is the topic we're dealing with is a really good end of what upper sixth. They're the right age.
Yeah.
They've got the right level of maturity to deal with that. We might have to think of another lesson rather than just move the lesson earlier, because it's because I think you need a certain level of maturity, I think, to deal with some of that. I don't think they necessarily have that when they first come in. Yes.
What was that book called again?
Rebel Ideas, Matthew Syed. He wrote Black Box Thinking as well. I really would recommend it. He's just basically saying how if you think of things different ways, diversity in every sense of the word helps groups develop. That if you have a single monolithic view, you end up calcifying, essentially. And that's what we're trying to explain to them, that they'll calcify if they stick to their own worldview and don't open themselves up to others.
Can you tell me what steps you took when you were implementing the thinking move strategy in the department?
Well, basically, Maria came to me with it. I said, right, go ahead, get on with it. No offence, I just said, you're leading on this. Tell us what you're going to do. So what Maria did is we do a lot of joint planning in our department. Rather than have teachers just kicking off and doing their own lessons, we need to have, we've got so many, we have to have core understanding. So we joint plan our lessons. So Maria explained how she thought thinking moves could be used within certain lessons, and that's what we try and do. And so if it's, sometimes it's explicit, we'll say we're using this thinking move, and sometimes it is implicit. So what we did was looked at what it was and how we could adapt tasks within that and how it would reflect the thinking moves. But it's a working process because we're all new with it. You know, sometimes you just use words. Let's think back. Let's think ahead. But say thinking back is retrieval practice, isn't it? Really, thinking ahead is making a prediction of what's going to come, what might be the consequences of something. You do it anyway. We do it all the time. What we're doing is trying to formalise it. But if you look at some of our lessons, they will have very much specific thinking moves built into some of the lessons to help them, especially engage with certain topics. Does that make sense?
I saw it being used in a workshop context with our gifted and talented students. Came to Catherine and said, I think this is really valuable for us. Then I did a whole staff little slot to see if anyone else was interested, and we got someone in to come and do some training. So we've all had training, the whole department has had training on the kind of foundation modules, which is three sessions of 2 hours, and that was spread out over a year. So everyone was building up their expertise, and it does take a bit of time as a teacher to internalise all the moves. But once you've got there, it's incredibly powerful in terms of questioning in the room and planning as well, and assessment. So we've all had that 6-hour training. I'm now at the point where I've done the advanced training as well, so I want to become a trainer in thinking moves. So yeah.
And I think that's really important. But we're trying to find the right how to assess meaningfully. It's not just it's a tick box activity because if we need to do it, something that's going to be meaningful and help them. And we think these coaching questions are going to be key because we can get them to do an assessment. If they do the coaching questions, it means that the more advanced students who are more comfortable with these things will just naturally develop this. But those who need the scaffolding, it will be there for them. And it will help them, prompt them. And then when we get them to reflect, we're going to get them to say, right, have you given an example? Have you expended? Discuss it. When we're going round, we can see how they've developed it. That's assessment. It doesn't have to have a grade with it. They're assessing themselves, and we're assessing their ability to be coached and be able to think about what they believe. I think we've got one more question.
Do you use a booklet, or do you have like exercise books for the lessons you're doing?
We have these
folders.
We have booklets, we have folders, but it's a working process. We have sort of pages for each of the key questions with key vocabulary that we'd expect them to know, or at least we want them to have heard about.
Can I just quickly ask you, just connect to Melanie from the Summit Devices. Connecting to what we were hearing about big stories, I wonder if you use in your curriculum Catholic literature to look at Catholic ideas through literature. I mean, I've done a series of lessons on Plato's The Dialogue with the Defence of Socrates. So I'm wondering if there's literature that you use that you think, yeah, that's a good, of Chesterton,
You've used a bit of C.S. Lewis and the virtue.
Yeah, no,
character education.
the character education we've used Narnia. I think it's difficult because of the diversity of the students we've got. Some will access it, some will not. But anyway, I think that's we've run out of time. We will be around if you want to ask, and this PowerPoint is available to you. If anybody wants to have our email addresses to ask more, we will be really happy to go further with this. As you said, we think we're on a really exciting journey with this. Thank you all very much.